Behind the designer suits and luxurious lifestyle hides a spoiled young man who believes the world bows to his wealth. Inside a courtroom where justice is meant to stand above all, he dares to mock a judge far wiser and more composed than he'll ever be. But what he doesn't realize is that the punishment awaiting him is not just a sentence, it's a life-changing moment. One final verdict leaves the entire courtroom in stunned silence, and his world will never be the same. Before we begin this powerful story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that inspire, awaken hearts, and change perspectives. The night was loud, filled with roaring engines and reckless laughter. Jeremy Carlton, the 23-year-old heir to Carlton Group, sped down the neon-lit streets of downtown Los Angeles in his matte black Ferrari. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot, and the stench of whiskey clung to him like perfume. "Faster," he slurred to his friend in the passenger seat, laughing like the world was his playground. Suddenly, a modest sedan appeared ahead, slowing to make a careful turn. Jeremy didn't brake. He didn't swerve. He rammed straight into it with a smug grin, sending the smaller car spinning across the intersection. People screamed. Traffic came to a halt. Jeremy stepped out casually, brushing imaginary dust off his blazer, and looked at the crumpled car he had just hit. "You should have stayed out of my way," he muttered with disgust. A young mother stumbled out of the driver's seat, her son crying in the back. But Jeremy didn't care. He laughed, took a selfie, and walked back into his car before the police arrived. And when they did, he scoffed at their questions. "My lawyer will clean this up by morning," he said with a wink. The officers arrested him anyway. Cameras flashed. The news spread fast. But Jeremy remained smug, confident that his last name would once again shield him from consequences. What he didn't know was that his next destination wouldn't be another party or hotel suite. It would be courtroom 3B, under the gavel of someone who couldn't be bought. And she was waiting. Courtroom 3B was silent, dignified, and cold in its stillness. The benches were filled with spectators, journalists, and a few quiet murmurs of anticipation. The echo of Jeremy's footsteps on the marble floor was sharp and deliberate. He entered like a celebrity, dressed in a snow-white designer suit, hair perfectly styled, and sunglasses resting arrogantly on his face. "Let's get this over with," he muttered, barely acknowledging the bailiff who asked him to remove his glasses. Judge Helen Moore entered through the side door, robed in black, her silver hair pulled neatly behind her head. She had been on the bench for over 30 years, known for her sharp mind and sharper sense of justice. At 67, she had seen countless young men like Jeremy, spoiled, untouchable, and immune to consequences. Everyone in the courtroom stood as she approached her seat. Everyone except Jeremy, who remained seated and even gave a small sarcastic clap. "Oh, please," he mumbled, loud enough for the court to hear. Judge Moore adjusted her glasses and stared at him. "Mr. Carlton, I advise you to remember where you are," she said calmly. Jeremy grinned. Yeah, I know. The Great Hall of Justice. Let's make it quick. My time is expensive." There was a collective gasp from the gallery. Even his lawyer looked alarmed. But Jeremy was unfazed. The prosecution laid out the facts of the night: Jeremy's speeding, intoxication, reckless endangerment, and the trauma inflicted on the victims. Photos of the accident were shown. The woman's testimony was played on video, her voice trembling, her son clinging to her as she spoke. Jeremy yawned. "This is boring," he whispered to his lawyer, not caring that Judge Moore was watching. She didn't interrupt. Not yet. When it was Jeremy's turn to speak, he leaned back in the witness chair, smirked, and said, "You all act like I killed someone. It was a bump. My car got more damage than theirs. You should be charging her." The judge didn't blink. She scribbled something silently, then looked up and said, "We will proceed to sentencing." Jeremy scoffed and crossed his arms. "Great. I'll just wire the fine right now." But Judge Moore wasn't done. Not even close. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence as Judge Helen Moore cleared her throat and looked straight at Jeremy Carlton. He was lounging in the defendant's chair, legs crossed, phone in hand, whispering something to his lawyer while half smiling at the cameras behind him. The judge's voice was calm, steady, and firm. "Mr. Carlton," she began, "you have not only endangered lives but have demonstrated an astonishing lack of remorse. You have mocked the legal system, belittled the people you harmed, and acted as though your wealth grants you immunity." Jeremy rolled his eyes. "I've seen young men like you," she continued. Born into privilege, raised without boundaries, convinced the world owes you respect simply because of your last name. But today this courtroom does not recognize your wealth. It recognizes your actions. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the room. For your crimes, you are hereby sentenced to 90 days of incarceration at Haddon Creek State Facility. Jeremy snapped upright. Wait, what? The judge raised her hand, silencing him. Followed by 1 year of mandatory community service at the accident victims' neighborhood. You will live among them, work among them, and report directly to the local civil office. You will also attend bi-weekly rehabilitation sessions and empathy counseling, and any breach will extend your sentence. The room erupted into murmurs. Jeremy stood up in disbelief. You're joking. My father will. Your father, Judge Moore interrupted sharply, does not rule this court. The bailiff stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Jeremy's shoulder. His jaw clenched as reality finally pierced through his ego. But I'm Jeremy Carlton, he whispered, almost to himself. Judge Moore leaned forward. In here, Mr. Carlton, you are simply a man who made a terrible choice. Now you'll learn what it means to live with it. Jeremy's face lost all color. For the first time, the spoiled heir had nothing to say. And yet, the true lesson was only beginning. The gates of Haddon Creek State Facility clanked shut behind Jeremy Carlton, and with them, the last remnants of his old life faded. No more private chef. No more heated marble floors. No more vintage wine collections. Just concrete walls, a metal bed, and the scent of disinfectant that clung to the air like a warning. His white designer suit was taken. In its place, he wore a faded orange jumpsuit with a number stamped across the chest. No one cared who he was. The guards didn't flinch at his last name. The inmates didn't treat him special. In fact, many of them despised him instantly. Pretty boy thinks he's better than us, one muttered as Jeremy passed by. Jeremy tried to assert himself, tried to flash the same smug confidence he used in court. But every joke fell flat. Every sarcastic smirk was met with silence or worse, indifference. On his second night, he was assigned to clean the communal bathrooms. Scrubbing floors that reeked of bleach and regret, he gagged with every stroke of the brush. This is beneath me, he grumbled, but no one was listening. Days turned into weeks. Jeremy's hands, once manicured and untouched, grew calloused and sore. His meals were bland, his nights sleepless, and the sound of cell doors locking became a bitter lullaby. The guards didn't yell, but they didn't smile either. They treated him exactly like everyone else. And slowly, something inside Jeremy began to crack. Not out of fear, but from something far more unfamiliar, humility. One morning, during a mandatory group session, he listened to another inmate talk about the accident that took his brother's life. It wasn't about Jeremy, but the story made his stomach twist. He had never really listened to anyone before. Not like that. The days at Haddon Creek were monotonous, but each one stripped away a piece of the armor he had worn all his life. And when his 90 days finally came to an end, Jeremy didn't smile. Because he knew the hardest part was still ahead. Jeremy stepped out of the prison van into a neighborhood he had never imagined visiting, let alone living in. Cracked sidewalks, flickering streetlights, and the faint sound of children playing in the distance painted a world far from the penthouses and yacht clubs he once called home. His court-mandated community service had begun. A modest apartment above a local grocery store had been prepared for him. It had no air conditioning, no internet, and the furniture looked like it belonged to another century. His suitcase was gone. Only a city-issued backpack with 2 uniforms and a schedule awaited him on the old wooden bed. Each day at sunrise, Jeremy reported to the civil office. His tasks ranged from collecting trash to repainting playground fences and planting trees in empty lots. At first, he hated every second. He didn't speak to the locals and they didn't speak to him, only watched, whispering among themselves. But something unexpected happened. On his 3rd day, an elderly man offered him a bottle of cold water after seeing Jeremy struggle to lift a stack of wooden planks. He didn't smile, just nodded, and walked away. On the 6th day, a group of kids watched him mop the floor of the community center. One of them, a small girl with big eyes, said, "Are you the bad man from the news?" Jeremy froze. He looked at her, then at his hands gripping the mop, then back at her. "I was," he whispered. She blinked, then skipped away. No one congratulated him. No one cared about his surname. But little by little, Jeremy began to change. Not because he had to, but because the silence of this place forced him to see himself clearly for the first time. Then, after 2 weeks, he was assigned to help restore a house that had been badly damaged in the accident. It was the same house belonging to the woman he had crashed into. And she was waiting at the door. Jeremy stood frozen at the gate, the rusted latch trembling slightly in his hand. Across the yard, framed by peeling paint and a faded blue door, stood Mrs. Clara Jennings. Her gaze was sharp, not out of hatred, but from a depth of emotion Jeremy had never been forced to face before. Her son, a quiet boy no older than 10, peeked from behind her leg, gripping the hem of her skirt. Jeremy took a hesitant step forward. "I'm here to help with the repairs," he said softly. Clara's eyes didn't blink. "You already did enough damage," she replied, her voice steady. Jeremy lowered his head. "I know." She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream. Instead, she stepped aside. "The toolbox is in the kitchen. Roof's been leaking since last rain." He walked in with cautious steps, not touching anything he didn't need to. The house was modest, clean, but still bore signs of trauma. A cracked window, a missing stair rail, dents in the walls. He worked silently for hours, replacing roof panels, fixing shelves, patching up broken trim. Sweat dripped down his face, his shirt clung to him, but he didn't stop. At noon, Clara placed a glass of lemonade on the porch. She didn't say a word. Neither did he. The next day he came back. And the next. He rebuilt the fence, rewired the broken lights, even repainted the mailbox. Each day, her son watched him from a distance, inching a little closer. On the 6th day, the boy finally spoke. "Is it true you had a Ferrari?" Jeremy looked up, startled, then nodded slowly. "I did." The boy tilted his head. "Then why are you here?" Jeremy stared at the tool in his hand, then replied, "Because for once, I want to fix something instead of breaking it." The boy didn't answer. But he sat down beside him, silent company under the sun. By the end of the week, Jeremy had finished the repairs. As he packed up the last of his tools, Clara stepped onto the porch and held out a small envelope. "It's not money," she said. "Just a note." Inside, written in clean handwriting, were only 3 words. "I forgive you." Jeremy stood still, heart thudding in a way he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't relief. It was release. But he still had months of service ahead. And one final visitor who would change everything. It was a quiet afternoon when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb of the community park Jeremy had helped restore. He was kneeling near a flower bed, soil on his hands, planting new marigolds beside the children's swings. The car door opened. From it stepped Richard Carlton, his father. Jeremy didn't look up. He had been expecting this. Richard, always immaculate in his tailored suits and polished shoes, scanned the park with a look of unease. The sight of his only son in faded work clothes, kneeling in dirt, visibly disturbed him. "Jeremy," he called. Jeremy wiped his hands and stood. His posture was calm, no longer the cocky slouch of entitlement. His eyes, no longer glazed with arrogance, met his father's with quiet strength. "I heard the court gave you real punishment," Richard said, trying to mask his discomfort. "You've made your point. Come home. The company needs you." Jeremy took a moment before responding. "I'm not coming back." His father frowned. "Don't be ridiculous. I've already spoken to the lawyers. The board." "I'm not the same person you sent here, Dad," Jeremy cut in. "This isn't just about punishment. It's about who I want to be. And for the first time, I feel like a human being." Richard stepped forward, his voice growing cold. "You'd throw away your inheritance for this?" Jeremy looked around at the clean park benches, the fresh flowers, the kids playing freely where broken glass used to lie. "For this," he said quietly, "I'd trade everything." Richard was speechless. The power he had always held over his son evaporated in a single sentence. Without another word, he turned and walked back to the car. Jeremy stood still, watching the car disappear into the distance. And then he smiled. The community began to change with him. People waved when he passed. Children asked for help with school projects. A local teacher invited him to speak to troubled youth. The court may have assigned the sentence, but Jeremy stayed beyond it by choice. He didn't need a title anymore. He had something far more valuable. A purpose. This story reminds us that true change cannot be bought, inherited, or faked. It comes through humility, reflection, and the willingness to take responsibility for one's actions. Jeremy Carlton grew up thinking the world revolved around him, protected by a name and a fortune. But in losing those privileges, he discovered something far more powerful: empathy, purpose, and the ability to heal the pain he caused. Justice is not just about punishment, it's about restoration. Redemption does not begin with wealth or influence. It begins when someone chooses to become better, even when no one is watching.